So thanks for the introduction. My name is Jill McKelly. Thank you for getting that right. Sometimes I go by Jill Michelli professionally only because it's easier and more phonetically to spell versus the proper way, which is McKelly, which sounds like it's Irish. So thank you for the introduction. Today I'm going to talk about digital accessibility. And I first wanted to give you a brief overview of AudioEye. AudioEye is a technology-based company serving businesses committed to providing equal access to their digital content. We're a technology-focused company that really specializes in fixing and remediating issues of accessibility. We really pride ourselves on making digital content more accessible and more usable for more people. And AudioEye has been in existence for about 10 years. It was started by our founder, Sean Bradley. His brother was diagnosed with an eye disease, and basically Sean came up with this technology to help remediate websites and make them a lot more usable for people with disabilities. We have about 50 full-time employees, and over half of our staff, actually more like 75% of our staff right now, are certified by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, meaning that the majority of our staff are considered subject matter experts on digital accessibility. We really focus on the legal requirements. We're really working closely with a lot of different law firms, the Department of Justice, and the Office of Civil Rights to ensure that we're in the know with all of the legal requirements and what's going on in the industry. We focus on WCAG 2.0, Section 508, and the newly released WCAG 2.1 that's coming out later this year. Right now, AudioEye publishes more than 1 billion remediations daily on thousands of sites. We have over 1,000 customers, and with that, we're publishing, like I said, over 1 billion remediations on a daily basis to help fix those accessibility issues. So today we're going to cover the 3 most common myths of digital accessibility. The first one is people who are blind don't use the internet. The second most common myth we hear is people with disabilities are a very small population. And finally, compliance requires redesign and rebuild of your website. So we'll go through those in more detail throughout the presentation. And if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. And I'll try and get to them at the end just because there's a lot of content I want to get through today. So we'll get to the questions at the end. So the myth that we hear the most on a day-to-day basis, particularly people who are not familiar with digital accessibility, or really just a lot of assistive technologies in general, are people who are blind don't use the internet. Well, in fact, yes, they do. They simply just need assistive technology. So I know a lot of you are pretty familiar with these types of numbers and are familiar with the industry as a whole. But just to give you sort of a background, I always feel like the numbers become so much more powerful. You know, there's over 15% of the world population lives with a disability, and those can be, you know, such a wide variety. It's not just people that are blind. There's low vision, there's mobility issues, there's hearing issues, there's a lot of hidden disabilities that we'll get to in just a second. And some of the things that we've really found and really stand out to us as a company is that a Microsoft study was conducted recently, and it found that 75% of people with disabilities use computers, and more than 66% of them use some form of assistive technology. We also found that in the same study from Microsoft that 22% of working age adults are likely to benefit from the use of assistive technology. So those are just a few high-level numbers to get us started and really kind of showcase, you know, that this isn't just about people with disabilities. It's really about making digital content usable for more people across the board. So in terms of digital accessibility, we like to call it the ramps and rails of the digital world. So the same way that the ADA applies to physical locations in terms of ramps and rails, elevators, certain height requirements, that's starting to apply to the digital world. We're consuming all of our content online. You know, if you look at just the retail world in general, stores are closing at a rapid rate, which means that people need to go visit their websites and shop online. Same with banking. There's a lot of banking and finance institutions that have moved away from a brick and mortar structure to more of a digital presence. So what that means is they've got to make sure that their content is accessible for everybody. And by doing that, as you know, people with disabilities tend to use what we call assistive technologies. And that can range from screen readers. Some of the most common screen readers out there are JAWS, VoiceOver, NVDA. You also want to make sure that there's closed captioning for people that have hearing impairments. Same with mobility issues. You want to make sure that when you're thinking about building a website, it's not just keyboard or mouse accessible. It needs to make sure it's keyboard accessible, and that just applies to the greater population as a whole. Again, we're thinking about making the content accessible and usable for more people, not just people with disabilities. So, you know, this is really a great way to sort of think about digital accessibility. It's the rampant rails of the digital world. So again, we want to rethink the word disability. We don't like to put it into a box of people just with visual impairments or mobility impairments or hearing impairments. It's going so much deeper. It's a lot of people with hidden disabilities these days. So dyslexia is one of the #1 top hidden disabilities. You also have things like learning disabilities, auditory issues, maybe you have some other ADD, things like that. All of these really acquire additional assistance and can be used with assistive technologies. So again, we want to just broaden the topic and make people more aware that it's not someone that might be blind and it's apparent, but more so that there is a lot of hidden disabilities out there. And so by making your content accessible, you're really appealing to those people as well. So the second misconception is web accessibility legislation is on hold, so I don't need to worry. And that's really true, but only if you don't have a website. So AudioEye has been working closely with a lot of the local advocates, a lot of law firms, as well as the Office of Civil Rights. And one of the things that we've noticed is that there is a huge increase of litigation in the digital accessibility world. So the same way for a long time that people were going around sort of trolling physical locations, and maybe someone's been in business for 30 years and they don't have a ramp or a rail, and then all of a sudden they get hit with this sort of letter or lawsuit. That's applying to the internet right now. And so what we found that the increase of lawsuits has basically like tripled in the last couple years. We work really closely with Lainey Feingold. She's a local attorney that helps with a lot of the settlements here in the Bay Area and just across the country. And what she's said recently is because the ADA is sweeping the civil rights laws that prohibit discrimination against people with disabilities, it's more because the law requires participation, and without digital access, there's no participation. And so what we've found is that Title II of the ADA is starting to apply to these lawsuits, meaning that if there's a place of public accommodation, that should be applying to the digital and internet world as well. So right now, the rulemaking from the Department of Justice is on hold. However, the ADA is alive and well. And so even though they haven't really made a clear ruling on digital accessibility at this point in time, there is a lot of litigation still coming from this. There's a lot of letters that are being generated. There's a lot of lawsuits. There's a lot of litigation, particularly in California, Florida, and New York. And so what we found really is, again, in December of 2017, there were 800 federal web accessibilities filed. And that number is expected to exceed 1,000 in the coming months. So it is real, and it is a good thing because it's really promoting awareness, and it's making sure that everyone has equal access to the content that is online. A lot of these settlements require that you usually pay out the plaintiff. It's not a large sum of money, but it's a monetary amount nonetheless. But then you also need to make sure that you purchase some sort of tool or hire a subject matter expert to ensure that your websites are accessible and conforming to certain standards. You usually need to hire a web content or a web accessibility coordinator. Sometimes there's training involved. And so if you get ahead of this and proactively are making sure your web content is accessible, it's going to save you and your team a lot of time and money in the long run, and it's really the right thing to do. The other thing that we've been working closely with is the Office of Civil Rights. So our founder and president, Sean Bradley, has been working really closely with the Office of Civil Rights. Recently they came out with some numbers, and the Office of Civil Rights really applies to the education sector. So again, K through 12 has been hit really hard with a lot of settlements and OCR letters claiming that their website content's not accessible, and so they give them a certain amount of time and provide a list of things that the school districts need to do in order to comply to the WCAG and Section 508 standards for accessibility. And just to give you a little bit of content around this, 60% of the OCR complaints are web-related, which is a huge amount, and approximately 500 of the 805 pending investigations are web accessibility related. And this is only going to keep increasing over time. Okay, so the next portion is our most, again, one of the most common misconceptions or myths of digital accessibility is that compliance requires site redesign and rebuild. Wrong again. So the best way to talk about digital accessibility in terms of guidelines and standards is what's called the Web Accessibility Content Guidelines 2.0, or it could be called WCAG, WCAG 2.0. It really depends on sort of what part of the country you are. And I've noticed, just being in the industry for as long as I have, the East Coast tends to call it WCAG, the West Coast calls it WCAG 2.0. There's no real difference. It's just a dialect, I guess. But really what these are a set of guidelines that are the technical standards for digital accessibility. And there's 4 guiding principles for the Web Accessibility Content Guidelines. It's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And each of these have a set of criteria associated with them. And so the way I like to sort of think about it is in terms of perceivable. What does that really mean? It means you need to provide text alternatives for non-text content. It also means you need to provide captions and other alternatives for multimedia. You also need to ensure that it's easier for users to see and hear the content. So anything that you can perceive really falls into that section of the guidelines. For operatable, I like to always think of it as you need to make sure that the functionality is there. So make sure that all functionality is available from a keyword perspective. It also makes sure that you give enough time to read and use the content. And you also need to help users navigate and find content. So it's really anything on the operable level in terms of functionality. And then in terms of understandable, some of the key takeaways for this that I always think of is make sure that the text is readable and understandable. Make content appear and operate in a predictable way. And then also help users avoid and correct mistakes. And then finally we have robust, and this really means like maximize compatibility with current and future user tools. So it needs to be a robust solution. And so that's how we think of the digital accessibility content guidelines in the industry as a whole. It's the POUR, which is really easy to remember. So if you break it down even further, you really want to break it out into the fact that the WCAG 2.0 is broken into 4 main principles, which we just went through, the POUR. There's 12 guidelines, and under those 12 guidelines, there's 61 testable success criteria. And then in the near future, I don't think there's an actual date just yet, but it should be coming out soon. There's going to be a new portion of WCAG, which is called 2.1. There's going to be additional success criteria that are going to be added on to that. And then there's 3 main portions of WCAG. So there's A, AA, and AAA. So A are the things that you must do to ensure that your website is accessible. AA build onto that and make sure that it's usable. And then for me, AAA, I like to think about as the nice to haves. A lot of time in the industry, you'll be hearing about WCAG 2.0 AA, and what that really means is that really is incorporating A and AA standards. So you never just want to build out a site that is AA compliant. You want to make sure that you're always thinking about the A requirements as well as the AA. You really need to start with A and then build onto that with AA. And so one of the things I also wanted to talk briefly about is how do you make your content accessible? I was going to add in another slide, but I think I can add it in at the end, or what I can really do is just kind of talk through some of the key things you want to think about as you're starting to build out these accessible criteria for your website. And it really falls into, again, the WCAG success criteria. So just real quickly, some of the things you really want to think about is, you want to make sure you choose a content management system that supports accessibility. You want to use headings correctly to organize the structure of your content. You want to make sure that you include proper alt text for images. Give your links a unique and descriptive name. Use color with care. That's always really important to me. You want to make sure you design your forms with accessibility in mind. And you want to ensure that all your content can be accessed with the keyboard alone in a logical way. So again, there's just some key things to think about in terms of digital accessibility. Again, you want to take into consideration the POUR acronym. Make sure it's perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And with that being said, one of the reasons AudioEye came into development was because we've seen in the industry that it's not been easy to make websites accessible. There hasn't been a fast, quick way to do this. It usually takes a lot of time, knowledge, and resources in terms of making websites accessible. I came from a traditional approach where the company I worked for did a lot of audits, and that was a long and lengthy process. It was fantastic information, but unless you have a really knowledgeable and big team of people, it was really hard for a lot of companies to make their websites accessible in a timely manner. There's a lot of other great tools out there that scan your website, tell you what's wrong, and then you're able to take that information and again, go through maybe some Google searches, figure out how to find the code and make your forms accessible, things like that. So there hasn't really been an easy way to do this for a long time. It's getting better and better, and there's a lot of great free scanning tools out there to kind of give you a sense of where your digital accessibility risks lie. But what AudioEye did was really come up with a technology-based solution that's going to make your websites a little bit usable and accessible and conform to the standards in a fast and efficient way. And so what we've done is come up with a nice balance of automated and manual remediation techniques to achieve and maintain compliance with the ADA-related digital accessibility requirements in mind. We have actually patented our technology, and it's all in line with the sections WCAG 2.0 and Section 508, as well as the new WCAG 2.1. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of how AudioEye works, like I said, it's a technology-based approach. So what we like to do is we actually scan the websites and we figure out what's wrong, and we deploy a JavaScript technology that actually goes in and fixes a good portion of your issues. We go through that process, and then we remediate the issues using JavaScript in our mix of accessibility engineers and assistive technology testers. From there, we're able to really, in a sense, build an overlay between your website and the assistive technology user. So we're never going to touch your source code. We're simply building this really great overlay with customized fixes and remediations to your website. In addition to that, we also have a toolbar that I'll get into in a little bit later. But our toolbar really is intended to enhance usability. So our toolbar gives you the ability, or the end user the ability, to to change the font. So we have a dyslexic font for people that are dyslexic. We also have a way to change the color contrast. So if someone has issues with color, you're able to go in and change the color palette. And on an ongoing basis, we're going to maintain and monitor the website on a regular basis. So as you push out new content, we're constantly reviewing it and fixing it. So I wanted to give you a little bit more insight as to how our process works. I know not everyone on the phone is technical, and so I always find that a nice visual is a great way to kind of comprehend how our solution works and how it's a little bit different than the others. Again, we really try to focus on technology. We know it's not going to fix everything, but we want to see how much we can fix using our technology-based approach. So we call it phase one. So phase one is really the only work that you need to do on your end. What we do is, again, provide you a piece of JavaScript that you embed into your website or your CMS. From there, we go through and we scan the website and we apply automatic fixes. And these are going to be certain things that we can fix. You know, it could be form fields. Those are really easy for us to fix. It could be your Facebook link. It could be a lot of things that are really common in everyday accessibility issues that we see on a regular basis. As I mentioned, we're fixing, or we're pushing out over 1 billion remediations daily, so our library of automatic fixes is pretty robust. And so that really goes into phase one. It's all about the automation and how much we can fix using technology. And then from there, we're going to build on, and we basically separate out the website. So we're going to look for your templates. We're going to actually go through, and anything we can't fix automatically, we put into a separate bucket. And that bucket goes through a series of testing processes against the WCAG should auto standards and Section 508 if it applies. And basically, we have a team of engineers that go through and they're doing additional testing against the success criteria, and they're building out additional customized remediations for your website. And from there, it really goes into extending and building onto that initial JavaScript. And like I said, we're going to build this overlay between your website and the assistive technology user. So when somebody goes in and uses assistive technology, they're going to have a really, really great experience. The form fields are going to be labeled clearly. It's going to tell you how to navigate the website. It's clear, concise, it's easy to understand, and it's easy to navigate. And that's all done through our technology overlay solution. From there, we also are going to deploy our toolbar. So our toolbar is fantastic because we actually have a certification. So again, phase three and our solution is all about our usability tool. So we launch a toolbar. It has a certification. The certification really is a great way to help mitigate your risk, particularly knowing that there's so much litigation out there. Our certification states where you're at in the different phases of our solution. The language on our toolbar has all been approved by a number of different legal counsels and a lot of internal counsel like this language as well. We also have a help desk. So one of the reasons we implemented the help desk is just based on the feedback we've gotten from all of our clients over the years. It just really seems like if someone is using assistive technology and they have a hard time with a website, they send an email or they call into a support number and they don't normally get the type of support that's always needed, or you know, maybe that person on the support line doesn't get back to you fast enough, whatever the case might be. We implemented a help desk, and that help desk is a form that gets submitted directly to our accessibility team. We usually can resolve the issues fairly quickly, but if not, we work with our clients and their team to get that issue resolved just as fast as we can. But it's always nice to know that it's going someplace and someone's actually able to resolve your issues and is paying attention to it in a priority level. So our toolbar, again, also has the ability to change font. We call that our reader. And then we also have a player. So it's a built-in screen reader. It's not to take the place of anyone's assistive technology, such as JAWS or VoiceOver. It's really just an added enhancement. And what we've also found is that, particularly on the school district side, a lot of the younger generation really think it's cool and enjoy the fact that their school district has this ability to read everything out loud, because so many of the students now are so reliant on Surrey and the Google products and everything that is using voice these days. So that's really how our process works. I'm happy to talk further about that with anyone offline. We also can scan your website and actually show you where your errors and risks lie. So we're happy to do that. That's a free service that we offer. And usually takes me about 24 hours to get you a scan back if you are curious as to sort of where your errors and risks lie within the different guidelines. So I just want to touch on our toolbar a little bit more, just because I really find it to be a great asset for anyone that has a website. As we mentioned, there is a lot of litigation out there, so we have implemented a certification that really stands out. A lot of times, if you go to maybe Seattle Public School District's website, kia.com, the San Diego Zoo, all of those are our clients, and they have our certification on their website. And what this means is when you click on our icon, it brings up the toolbar. It has the certification. It has the help desk. It has the reader and the player. In addition to that, we also can offer voice technology. So if you do want to implement that so someone can actually speak to the website and do certain commands and functionalities, we have that ability as well. It's still in beta, but it still works pretty well. And we're definitely improving that on a daily basis. And so beyond accessibility, we really want to think about digital accessibility as usability. As I mentioned, our toolbar is really intended to make your website more accessible and more usable for more people. It's not to replace anyone's assistive technology. It's really just to enhance the usability of the website, particularly those that might have a hidden disability. So we just sort of touched on that. And then I always get this question, how does the AudioEye toolbar interact with assistive technology? So basically when the assistive technology user visits the site for the first time, they hear an introduction to AudioEye that says this website has been AudioEye enabled and optimized for accessibility. It will then continue with an explanation of every tool available in the toolbar, and should the user want to submit feedback on the help desk or see the certification. So just some takeaways in terms of digital accessibility. I know everyone has their own different accessibility initiatives and roadmaps, but sort of the common themes, again, between the OCR, all these different demand letters out there, they have the same components. And really what that means is you need to make sure you're auditing your website on a regular basis. So whether you're using a free scanning tool, one of the more sophisticated accessibility consultants out there that are going to actually audit it in depth and provide you all the areas that you need to make fixes at the code level, or if it's someone like AudioEye that's going to do it for you. You really need to make sure you're auditing your websites on a regular basis. Also want to make sure that you're doing testing on a regular basis, particularly with assistive technology. Just because you code something a particular way doesn't mean that it's usable for someone with assistive technology. So really the testing with assistive technologies in terms of screen readers, keyboard accessibility are really, really important. You can do things like auto remediation. Again, technology is becoming a great way to remediate your website. I know for a long time that it wasn't available for a lot of websites and there wasn't a lot of options to use technology, but we're in the forefront of this world right now, and websites are changing very quickly. We're pushing out new content on a regular basis, so why not let technology help speed up the process a little bit. Training I always find to be really important. You want to make sure that you're not only educating your team about why it's important to make sure your website's accessible and who it affects and how to make it more usable, but also if you are working with the development team or designers, kind of list out those best practices that I talked about earlier. You want to make sure that if you have pictures or images on your website that there's alt text. If you have forms, you want to make sure that they're labeled properly. You want to make sure that you're really implementing those core guidelines: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And then you want to make sure you're maintaining and monitoring your website on a regular basis. I live in San Francisco. I see the turnover within companies on a regular basis. You might have somebody that's really great and knows accessibility inside and out, and they might get a job and leave you 3 months later. and then you're kind of left in a lurch. You want to make sure that you are constantly monitoring and maintaining your website through those best practices and trainings. And again, you can use different tools out there, such as Subbing is a great option. AudioEye, again, we're scanning and maintaining it on a regular basis. So just make sure that it's not just a one-time fix, that you are really making this a best practice and building this into your roadmaps as you push out your content. And then just a few key takeaways. Again, I know most of you are familiar with this, but 88.5% of Americans use the internet, and 15% of Americans live with a disability. And so what that really means is that there's a lot of content out there, and there's a lot of people using your websites, and there's a lot of people out there that might need a little extra assistance with consuming that content. And just keep in mind that AudioEye is a speed to compliance solution to help achieve and maintain your digital accessibility requirements in the most cost-effective manner. Again, there's a lot of different options out there. We just think it's, especially for smaller organizations, that we're a good fit just because we don't require a lot of time and resources on your end. And overall, we really strive as a company just to make digital content more usable and more accessible to more people. So with that being said, I'll take some questions. I know that Tucker had a question about the IAAP exam. For those of you who are not familiar with that, that's the exam that the majority of the people in our company have taken. It is, Tucker, a very hard exam. There's not a lot of good study materials out there. I know that DQ has a study guide, which is okay. There's also the Book of Knowledge you can use, but we have just been informed recently that there is a new study guide out there, and I can send you the details on that. I think it's a consultant or somebody that's working through Princeton. I think this gentleman has come up with a really good study guide that should help you pass the exam and make it a little bit easier for you. I know it is a really hard exam, and the study guides aren't the best, but hopefully this new resource will help you.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
So as we put in, if anyone has any other questions, again, I just want to emphasize we're happy to scan your websites for you. You can send an inquiry directly to me or through Ability Tools. We're happy to help you build out different roadmaps and talk about different ways to help make your content more accessible.
I had a question, if it's okay.
Sure.
I deal a lot with videos, so I was wondering if you can maybe touch a bit on the video elements in the website with accessibility. That's what kind of I'm interested in. I don't know if if you have information about that, that could be great.
Yeah, definitely. So again, videos are a key component of digital accessibility. There's a lot of videos out there. There's YouTube, Vimeo, I think it is.
Yes.
And so I know that YouTube has a good way to caption or an option to provide captions. But if you do have a lot of videos and you are interested in making sure that they're captioned, we have partnered with a great company called 3Play Media. They specialize in captioning, particularly for accessibility. So it's a really easy company to work with. You just upload your videos. They turn around the captions pretty quickly. And then from there,
what are they called again?
It's 3Play Media. I can send the information to Stephen after the call. Yeah, they're really great. And they're really well known. Yeah, they're really well known in the digital accessibility industry. They really specialize in that. And I know that they're working closely with different companies. Like
just if you can.
No. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
And does that have to do with just implementing video in the website? Or I know about the closed captioning and stuff, but is there any guidelines, in like how you're composing the video itself or how it's placed in the website, etc.?
I think it really depends on the design of your website. I know that sometimes there's been some issues if they get iframed in, just because it's hard to access it through the iframe. But 3Play Media can probably give you some better guidelines. That's their specialty is video and accessibility. So I'm happy to give you the contact information over there. That is their specialty, and they can definitely give you tips and tricks. And then I think Vincent Lopez
awesome.
had a question about how much the average subscription for AudioEye is. So our pricing is based on complexity and the size of the website. Just to give you sort of a general sense, smaller websites such as credit unions, community banks, marketing sites usually run around $10,000 to $12,000 per year, and that includes all of our services, our toolbar, our certifications, and the maintenance and monitoring, as well as any additional testing or consulting that you might need. Something larger like a big retail site such as maybe like a Forever 21 or a big shopping retail site, those usually run around 25,000 to 30,000 just because they tend to have a lot of images and a lot of dynamic content. So it takes our team a little bit longer to get those remediated, and then we monitor those on a much more regular basis, almost daily, just based on the content that they push out. But we try and be very budget conscious. We are aware that, especially in the K through 12 area education, there might not always be a lot of budget for digital accessibility. Same with nonprofits. So we are definitely flexible, and we'll do whatever we can to work with you and the budget that you have. And again, if you want to take a look at our toolbar, Seattle Public School District's a great example. Also, San Diego Zoo has our toolbar, although I think they actually were doing some design work today, so it might not be live today. Kia.com. I can also send a list of other, the FCC is a great one. FCC.gov is using our toolbar, Social Security. So we work with all types of organizations, big and small. And so if you do want to have a look at our toolbar, those are some good examples of them. Okay, so Taylor has a question. Is there an easy standard for making documents, PowerPoints accessible that would be uploaded to a website? Yes and no. Most of the time, it's best. I think if you're using like the Microsoft tools, and actually I think Google as well, they have some really great accessibility features. I think you just need to turn on accessibility mode and make sure that you are labeling things properly. The kind of the tricky part with documents and PowerPoints is when you turn it into a PDF. There are different ways that you can make PDFs accessible, but it really starts at the native format. But most of the time, if you are using the Microsoft Suite or Google, there are accessibility features built into that. And I can provide you some more information offline as well if need be. Thank you for everyone for attending. I'm definitely happy to schedule any calls with anyone that wants to learn a little bit more, get a little bit more technical, whatever the case might be. But I really appreciate the time today and Ability Tools for asking me to speak on this topic. So thank you.